Welcome back to Scripture Horror. Before we begin, there's something you need to hear. A few of these stories were buried on purpose. Certain people in power didn't want the public knowing what was uncovered in those mountains. Tonight, we're diving into 6 of the most unsettling true Alaska mountain horror stories ever recorded. And trust me, none of this is fiction. These things happened to real people. Picture this: crews breaking through the frozen earth and uncovering remains that were never meant to see daylight again. A hunting guide stumbling onto something unspeakable inside a cave, something tied directly to his own bloodline, and it only spirals deeper from there. These accounts come from construction workers, wilderness guides, and ordinary men and women just trying to earn a living in the high, silent peaks. Some returned home. Some didn't. But every one of them witnessed something they'll carry to the grave, something ancient, something watching. If you're new here, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss our darkest uploads. The sky is fading, the ridges are quiet, but up in those mountains, something is awake. Let's begin with our first story. And I'm warning you now, after tonight, Alaska won't feel the same. My name is Jake Martinez, and I've been working construction for years, long enough to think I understood every danger a job site could throw at me. I've survived cave-ins, equipment failures, falls from height, you name it. I started as a laborer right out of high school, worked my way up to foreman by the time I was 30. I've built shopping centers in Phoenix and oil platforms in North Dakota. The pay was good, the work was honest. Nothing surprised me anymore. At least, that's what I thought. Until last March. Until Alaska. It was a pipeline expansion project about 50 miles southeast of Denali, out in the middle of nowhere. A 12-man foundation crew flew in from the lower 48, 3 months of work, triple overtime. You don't turn that down. My buddy Danny Reeves signed up, so I did too. We'd worked side by side for nearly a decade. If he was going, I trusted the job would be manageable. The landscape was unreal. Endless mountains, frozen wilderness in every direction. The permafrost layer was thick, 4 feet of frozen ground before you hit the bedrock. Our job was basic: pneumatic hammers in the morning to break the frost, excavators after lunch to clear out the trenches. Repeat until we hit target depth. Our heated trailers were surprisingly comfortable. The food wasn't half bad, and the Wi-Fi actually worked. For 2 weeks, things were smooth. March 13th was the day everything changed. Danny was operating the Caterpillar excavator on Section 4 when his bucket punched into something that shouldn't have been there. No dirt. No ice. He lifted the bucket, frowned, and dumped the load onto the ground. At first, we thought it was rotted timber, maybe a piece of an old mining structure. But when Danny swung out of the cab and I walked over with my phone recording, I instantly knew it wasn't wood. It was a human arm. Preserved, frozen stiff. And it wasn't alone. The more the excavator scooped, the more bodies surfaced. 7 of them, all frozen solid, perfectly preserved in the permafrost. Their clothing looked like something from the early 1900s. Wool coats, canvas pants, leather boots. Some even had rusted mining tools still on them. But the thing that hit me hardest were the bite marks. Deep, ragged gouges on their arms and legs. Human bite marks, but wrong. The spacing was off, the teeth impressions too sharp, too pointed. Like someone had filed their teeth into fangs. "Jesus, Jake," Danny whispered, climbing down. What the hell happened to them? I zoomed in with my phone, documenting everything. Their faces were gaunt, cheeks hollow, lips pulled back to reveal those same needle-like teeth. The fingernails were long, curved, almost claw-like, and their eyes, some were still open. Frozen wide, staring with an unnatural yellow tint, like a wolf's eyes. Danny did something stupid then. Something that still haunts me. He pulled off his glove and touched one of the bodies. "Danny, don't!" I started, but it was too late. The frozen hand twitched. Just a tiny movement. Probably from the temperature change. But it was enough to make both of us jump back. Danny cursed and grabbed his palm. He'd sliced it on something sharp sticking out of the corpse's hand. His blood dripped onto the ice. We reported the find immediately. The supervisor flagged the site, called the state authorities. They told us to leave the area untouched until an archaeologist could fly in. Could be days. Could be weeks. We went back to camp trying to shake it off. Danny didn't shake it off. At dinner, he barely touched his food. He kept staring at his plate like something was wrong with it. When I asked if he felt sick, he whispered, "Everything smells rotten." But the food was fine. I ate the same pot roast. Tasted perfect. That night, I went to the kitchen trailer for a snack. When I opened the walk-in cooler, Danny was inside, eating raw hamburger meat straight out of the packaging. His hands were covered in blood and grease, and he was chewing like a starving dog. I started filming immediately, heart pounding. "Danny, what the hell are you doing?" He looked up, and for a split second his eyes were bright yellow. The same sick, inhuman yellow as the frozen corpses. Then he blinked, and they were brown again. "I don't know, man," he gasped. "Nothing else tastes right." Over the next few days, things spiraled fast. Danny's fingernails grew longer. His voice became deeper, almost a growl when he spoke. He stopped eating cooked food altogether, only raw meat. He moved differently, too. Silent, smooth, predatory. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the rest of the crew with this hungry, confused look. On the fourth night, I followed him. He didn't know I was filming as he walked across camp, heading for the excavation site. He ducked under the safety fencing and knelt beside the preserved bodies. And then he started eating them. He tore off strips of frozen flesh with his bare hands, stuffed it into his mouth. The sounds, wet, crunching, snarling noises, still keep me awake at night. I went back to the trailer and started searching online for anything that matched what we'd found. Old records. Mining camps. Cannibalism. I didn't expect to find anything real, but I did. In 1906, a group of miners had been trapped during an early winter storm in that exact area. Rescue teams later reported cannibalism. But the unofficial accounts, the ones buried in old newspapers and letters, described something far worse. Miners who ate human flesh developed unstoppable hunger. Their teeth sharpened, their fingernails grew. Their eyes turned yellow. They hunted the remaining men. And anyone who touched an infected corpse became infected themselves. The territory government buried the evidence, literally burned the camp, and now we had unearthed their bodies. Perfectly preserved, perfectly contagious. By the following afternoon, the hunger hit me. At first, it felt normal. But when I sat down for lunch, everything smelled like rot. The soup looked spoiled. The bread reeked of mold. Even the coffee tasted foul. The only thing that smelled good was the raw meat in the cooler. That evening, I filmed myself tearing into raw caribou meat like an animal. "Day 7, I whispered to the camera. "I can feel my teeth changing. God help me. The hunger. The hunger is all I can think about." Within 2 weeks, 8 of our 12-man crew were infected. Our bodies changed quickly, teeth sharpening, nails lengthening, eyes shifting to yellow. We stopped using tools to hunt animals. Our hands worked better, faster. We could hear things farther than we should, smell blood from a distance. The 4 uninfected workers barricaded themselves inside one trailer at night, sleeping in shifts, terrified of us. Rightfully terrified. Because on day 15, we hunted them. I filmed everything. I don't know why. Maybe because some small part of me was still human. Maybe because I knew no one would ever believe this without proof. The footage showed us moving through the dark like wolves. Silent, coordinated, hungry. When we broke into their trailer, it was over in seconds. I filmed myself biting into my best friend Tommy's throat. I filmed the blood. The feeding. The frenzy that lasted 2 full hours until nothing was left but bones and scraps of clothing. When the hunger faded, I stared at the camera and barely recognized my own face. Hollow cheeks. Yellow eyes. Teeth like a shark's. The infection was complete. By the time my mind started slipping away, I managed to record one last message. One last warning. I explained how the infection spread, how the permafrost had preserved it for more than a century, how climate change was melting the ground faster than ever, exposing more frozen bodies, more infected remains, more danger. I buried my phone in a waterproof case beneath the diesel generator, hoping someone would find it long after I was gone. The last thing I remember is Jake Martinez was running. Fast. So fast it felt like flying. The trees whipping past. The cold wind on my face, the scent of prey miles away, the hunger guiding every instinct. Weeks later, my phone's GPS showed movement more than 100 miles from the site before the battery finally died, tracking something that wasn't human anymore. 3 months after we disappeared, a cleanup crew found the construction camp. The official report said avalanche, but the site was littered with bones, human bones, scattered the way predators leave remains after feeding. DNA testing confirmed cannibalism, but the government classified everything, locked it behind federal walls. They didn't want panic about melting permafrost releasing infected bodies across Alaska. And it's still happening. 8 different construction sites have had crews vanish under mysterious circumstances, always in areas where permafrost is thinning, always after old remains are exposed. My phone was recovered, the footage classified. And somewhere out there, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, something that used to be me is still hunting, still starving, still spreading the infection to anyone unlucky enough to cross its path. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been working as a bank teller for years while studying astronomy part-time at the University of Alaska. I know it sounds like a strange combination, but the bank job pays for my classes and the telescope equipment I need. Since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with the northern lights. My grandmother used to say the aurora were spirits dancing in the sky. I didn't believe her back then. But after what happened last October on Mount McKinley, I'm no longer sure she was wrong. I've been photographing the aurora for years. What started as a hobby turned into something my astronomy professor said was good enough for legitimate research. I had all the gear, a Canon EOS with specialized lenses, GPS tracking equipment, and a computerized telescope mount that could follow celestial objects with precision. I wasn't some amateur with a phone camera. I knew exactly what I was doing. The forecast for October 12th promised perfect conditions, clear skies, minimal light pollution, and a major geomagnetic storm. It was supposed to be the best aurora display of the year. I took 3 days off work and drove my Jeep up to my usual spot, an isolated flat area about 8,000 feet up Mount McKinley. It was the same place I'd been dozens of times. Same route, same camping area, same setup routine. I could have done it blindfolded. But the moment I stepped out of my Jeep, something felt off. The air was completely still. Too still. No wind, no distant animal sounds, nothing. Just silence. A kind of silence I'd never felt before, like the whole mountain was holding its breath. I set up just before sunset. Telescope on the tripod, camera mounted, GPS logger recording my exact coordinates, 63 to 70 degrees north, 51 to 7 degrees west. Everything checked out. I cooked a quick dinner on my camp stove, sat back, and waited for darkness. Around 9 p.m., the aurora began as a faint green shimmer on the horizon. Then it erupted into the most vivid display I'd ever seen in my life. Ribbons of green, blue, and purple twisting across the sky like something alive. I started shooting immediately, adjusting the camera settings as the lights intensified, completely absorbed in my work. Then the first strange thing happened. My GPS began beeping like it was malfunctioning. I looked at the screen. My coordinates were jumping all over the place. One moment, it showed my campsite. The next, it said I was 12 miles east, then 47 miles south. I figured the geomagnetic storm was interfering with the signal. It happens. But then my camera began misbehaving too. The autofocus kept hunting back and forth like it couldn't lock onto anything. When I checked a few of the shots on the preview screen, my breath caught. Some of the photos showed my campsite from angles I hadn't taken. Side views of my tent and equipment, photos taken from positions where I was absolutely not standing. Yet the timestamps matched perfectly with the moments I was shooting straight up into the sky. I switched to manual focus, forced myself to keep shooting. The aurora was too incredible to waste time troubleshooting. I'd figure out the glitches later. Around 11 p.m., I decided to download the images to my laptop, and that was when everything began unraveling. In one photo stamped 10:48 p.m., I saw myself, me clearly visible setting up equipment next to my tent. But at 10,048, I'd been sitting by the camera taking long exposure shots of the sky. I checked the next shots. More images of me doing things I didn't remember doing, unpacking my Jeep, adjusting the telescope mount, writing in my notebook. But I hadn't touched my notebook all night. Confused, I grabbed the notebook to double-check. My heart nearly stopped. The pages were completely full of notes in my handwriting, observations from this campsite, daily logs, temperature readings, aurora shapes. But according to those pages, I'd been here for 18 days straight. 18 days. I had arrived that morning. I had only taken 3 days off work, yet the handwriting was mine. I know my own writing better than anyone. Some entries were dated days or weeks before. Others hadn't happened yet. One entry dated for the following day read, Day 19. Still can't leave. Every trail loops back. GPS shows impossible coordinates. I kept flipping pages, my hands shaking. Another entry, written in shakier handwriting, read, Day 42. God help me. Don't try to leave during the aurora. It only makes it worse. The electromagnetic field creates a kind of prison. My chest tightened. A cold, sinking dread rolled through me as the pattern became clear. Then I read the entry that destroyed whatever sense of reality I had left, Day unknown. Saw another version of myself today setting up camp on the east side. She can't see me. We exist in the same place, but different layers. The aurora fractures reality here. As if summoned by those words, I saw movement near my jeep. I looked up and froze. Someone stood there, silhouetted against the glowing green sky. Someone wearing my jacket, my pants, my boots, my height, my hair. It was me. I watched myself methodically unpacking equipment with cold precision, setting up a second campsite maybe 50 feet away. I called out. Nothing. I walked closer. She didn't react, didn't look my way. When I got close enough to see her face, my stomach twisted because it was my face. But older somehow, tired, defeated. I reached out and touched her shoulder. My hand passed straight through her like she was made of fog. She didn't flinch. Didn't notice. She was real, but not real. Present, but unreachable. In the same place, but not the same place. Panic spiked through me. I ran back to my campsite, grabbed my camera, and looked through the viewfinder. My breath stuttered. Through the lens, I could see dozens of versions of myself scattered across the mountainside. Some were setting up camp. Some were packing to leave. Some were sitting alone, staring into the distance with hollow eyes. One was crouched by a fire, trembling with terror. My camera saw them. My eyes saw them. They were real. My GPS was still cycling coordinates every second, displaying combinations that made no physical sense. According to the device, I was simultaneously in multiple places at once. The aurora wasn't just affecting electronics, it was fracturing space and time. And Mount McKinley had become a trap. Over the next few hours, more versions of me appeared. Some looked like they'd been here for days, others for weeks. One looked like she hadn't eaten in months. They moved around like ghosts of different timelines, all layered on top of each other. At around 3 a.m., one of them finally noticed me. She looked like she'd been here for weeks. Pale, exhausted, desperate, but real. Solid, touchable. She approached slowly. "You're new," she said, her voice rough. "How long have you been here?" "Since this morning," I whispered. "What is happening to us?" She sighed, looking up at the swirling aurora. The aurora creates dimensional layers. When the storm is strong enough, reality splits. We're all versions of the same person from different timelines, all trapped here at different points. "That one over there?" She pointed to a thin figure curled by a boulder. "She's been here for 2 years. The one by the fire?" 6 months. Some of them barely remember who they are. A distant scream tore through the darkness. I looked toward the sound. 2 versions of me were fighting, feral, starving, clawing at each other like animals. One sank her teeth into the other's arm. I stumbled back in horror. My companion didn't flinch. The longer they're here, the more they lose themselves. Isolation. Hunger. Exposure to the aurora. Their minds break. Some turn cannibal. They hunt the newer versions. I swallowed, sick to my core. "How do we escape?" She hesitated. I've been tracking aurora cycles. During blackouts, those brief moments when the lights fade completely, the dimensional boundaries weaken. That's the only time anyone gets out. The next one should be around 4 a.m. We spent the next hour preparing, but there was a catch. According to her notes, every escape required a replacement. When one version left, another appeared. The mountain demanded balance, demanded a sacrifice. "This is my chance," she said as the aurora began to dim. "I've waited weeks. What about me?" I asked. She looked away, guilt in her eyes. "You'll need to wait for the next cycle. Unless what? Unless you push me into one of the unstable dimensions, use the energy of the fracture to escape." But it would trap me forever. I stared at her, horrified. "I can't do that." "Then you'll be here for weeks, like me. And eventually, you'll consider the same choice." The sky went black. Total blackout. Stars appeared where the aurora had been. My companion sprinted toward the path, vanishing into the darkness. I felt a powerful pull tug at my body reality trying to drag me somewhere else. But I fought it. I stayed. I refused to sacrifice her. When the aurora blazed back to life, she was gone. In her place stood a new version of me, confused, frightened, freshly trapped. And I realized the truth. No one truly escapes. Every version who leaves condemns another to take her place. The mountain collects its debt, no matter what. I've been here for weeks now. I avoid the insane versions of myself. I help the new ones understand what's happening. But it's getting harder. My thoughts are slipping. My journal entries make less sense each day. Sometimes I speak to versions of myself who aren't real. Sometimes I wonder how easy it would be during the next blackout to push a new version into the fracture and run. I hate that the thought even crosses my mind. I've managed to rig my equipment to send this transmission during moments when the dimensional barrier's thin. If you are hearing this, stay away from Mount McKinley during aurora season. The lights are not just lights. They can trap human consciousness, split reality, and imprison you in infinite layers of yourself. I've recorded 16 missing people who vanished here over the past decade. Photographers, astronomers, researchers, all drawn to the beauty, all still here somewhere. If the aurora calls to you like it called to me, remember this: the mountain always takes its payment, and right now, that payment is me. End of transmission. My name is Rebecca Thompson, and I've been working at meteorological monitoring stations for years. I started as a weather technician right out of college, earned my certification in atmospheric data collection, and worked my way up to senior environmental monitoring specialist. I'd handled tornado tracking in Oklahoma, hurricane monitoring in Florida, and countless lonely nights in remote weather stations. I understood isolation better than most people ever would. But nothing prepared me for what happened during the winter at the Chugatac Mountain Weather Station in Alaska. That assignment changed every belief I had about darkness and about who might be waiting inside it. I was working night shifts at a hotel in Fairbanks when the job posting came through the National Weather Service database. A remote station needed someone for a full polar night monitoring assignment, the period when the sun doesn't rise for days. The pay was unbelievable. Triple overtime for the entire deployment, hazard compensation for psychological strain, isolation conditions, and environmental risks. The station was located miles north of Fairbanks, completely cut off. Helicopter access only, snowmobile if conditions allowed. My job seemed simple: record temperature readings every hours, monitor wind speed and atmospheric pressure, and transmit a daily report through the satellite uplink. The station had food supplies, generators, emergency radios, heating, fuel tanks, everything someone like me needed to survive the polar night. The helicopter dropped me off on November just as the last smear of orange sunlight sank behind the mountains. The pilot, Mike, a gruff man who'd flown weather teams for decades, helped me haul my bags inside. I expected a cramped shed with wires and freezing metal. Instead, the station was larger than I imagined. Main monitoring room, kitchen, bunk room, a small living area, and a storage room stacked to the ceiling with equipment and provisions. Thick, insulated walls, narrow, reinforced windows, heaters humming like distant engines. Mike showed me the satellite phone for emergencies, the backup radio system, and the generator panel before pausing at the doorway. "You sure about this, Rebecca?" he asked. "Days alone in total darkness, some people don't handle it well." I laughed it off. I had books, movies, work, peace and quiet. After years of noise, screaming hotel guests, and storm sirens, isolation sounded almost relaxing. Mike didn't look convinced, but he wished me luck and lifted off. I watched the helicopter lights vanish into the endless night, leaving me alone with the wind whispering across the snow. The first week was exactly what I expected. Routine, peaceful, almost boring. I checked instruments every hour, logged readings, sent reports. The station's perimeter motion sensors were state-of-the-art, designed to detect large animals or unusual weather patterns. The thermal cameras could pick up anything warm within yards. Everything worked perfectly. I read 3 books, binge-watched shows I downloaded, cooked simple meals. The silence became a blanket around me. No traffic, no human voices, just the hum of machines and the heartbeat-like ticking of the wind gauge. Then day arrived. I was reviewing the daily sensor logs when something odd caught my attention. At exactly a.m., all 4 perimeter sensors triggered in perfect sequence. East-north, east, south, west, as if something walked a slow, deliberate circle around the station. I opened the thermal camera file from that time, but there was nothing. Just an empty field of gray static, snow, and black sky. No heat signatures, no animals. Nothing. I assumed it was technical interference. Arctic temperatures can interfere with even the best equipment. I ran diagnostics. Everything came back normal. The sensors weren't malfunctioning. They were detecting something real. Something large enough to trigger them, but somehow invisible to heat-based imaging. Day brought the exact same pattern at the exact same time. A slow circle. The same order. The same duration. I stayed awake to watch the thermal cameras live during the next event, but again, nothing appeared. Just snow shifting in the wind. But the sensors insisted something was out there. I decided to go outside. Bundled in layers, I stepped into the freezing night, my portable thermal scanner buzzing in my hand. The cold slammed into me. Temperatures with a wind that bit straight through the seams of my jacket. I followed the path indicated by the sensors, sweeping the scanner slowly. Nothing. No warm shapes. No animals. No tracks. But as I stood still, listening, I heard footsteps in the snow. At first I thought they were mine, echoing back, but the rhythm was wrong. They were matching me. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they followed. My breath froze in my throat. I swept the scanner wildly. Nothing registered, just my own heat signature and the icy landscape. Yet I heard them, soft crunches, close enough that I should have been able to see a person standing right next to me. I hurried back inside, heart hammering. When I reviewed the portable camera's audio, I heard it clearly. 2 sets of footsteps, mine and someone else's. By day, I found the first undeniable physical evidence. Overnight, fresh snow had fallen around the station. When I looked through my bedroom window, my stomach twisted. There were footprints in the snow. Human-sized footprints leading directly to my window. Then around the building in the same circular path the sensors detected nightly. The prints were deep, heavy, clearly made by boots. I rushed outside, training the portable thermal camera over them. But the footprints emitted no heat at all, no trace that a living body had made them. On day, I set a trap. I scattered flour across the main entry floor and aimed a camera at it. Then I waited, staring at the live monitor. At exactly a.m., the sensors activated. I stared in horror as footprints appeared in the flour. Not a person. Not legs, just indentations. One step at a time. Slow. Careful. Walking across my floor. Something invisible was inside the station with me. I replayed the footage for hours, searching for glitches, reflections, anything. But there was no denying what I saw. Real physical impressions created by something that had no visible form. On day, handprints appeared on my frozen bedroom window. 5 fingers. Human, pressed from the outside. Again, 0 thermal signature. Later, while brushing my teeth, my breath fogged the mirror. Then another patch of fog appeared beside mine, as if someone exhaled right next to me. I slept with lights on, clutching the thermal camera like a weapon. But every new piece of evidence chipped away at my sanity. Equipment doesn't hallucinate. Sensors don't lie. Cameras don't fabricate footprints. The moment that broke me happened on day. I woke in darkness, half asleep, when something touched my face. Fingers. Cold. Smooth. Real. Gliding down my cheek. I snapped the lamp on. The room was empty. But the thermal camera beside my bed recorded it all. Indentations forming on my skin where invisible fingers pressed. But again, no heat signature, no visible form. Something was living with me inside that station. I set up motion-activated cameras throughout the building. By day, they recorded books sliding off shelves, doors opening, objects moving, all operated by invisible hands. I researched everything I could about polar night psychosis. Yes, isolation caused hallucinations. But cameras don't hallucinate. Sensors don't hallucinate. Physical footprints don't hallucinate. Then I found obscure research papers about prolonged sensory deprivation in polar conditions. Reports of reality perception breakdowns. Cases of people becoming partially invisible, cellular structures losing coherence under extended darkness. People fading from visibility entirely. Day changed everything. I started seeing faint outlines, pale human shapes, just at the edge of vision. At first like heat shimmers, then clearer. Figures standing near doorways, drifting between rooms. They became more defined each day, as if my eyes were adjusting not to darkness, but to a different layer of reality. They weren't hallucinations. They were people. Weather workers. Researchers. Technicians. Men and women who'd vanished from assignments over decades, trapped in some invisible state. They responded to my voice, my movements. Silent but expressive. They touched objects to communicate. And slowly, I understood. They weren't ghosts. They weren't dead. They were stuck. On day, the truth hit me like ice in my veins. These invisible people were trying to escape their condition, and they discovered they could only return to the visible world by merging with someone still alive. They pressed their hands against mine, and I felt flashes, memories, not mine. Voices whispering inside my mind, lives floating into my thoughts like drifting snow. I began speaking in voices I didn't recognize, answering questions in tones not my own. My camera recorded me having conversations with myself, multiple personalities overlapping inside my head. Their desperation was overwhelming. They were drowning and trying to climb into me to breathe again. By day, my own body flickered. I looked into the mirror and saw my face glitch in and out like a broken signal. The trapped workers were pulling me into their dimension. I knew if I didn't act, I would disappear entirely. So on day, I made my choice. I grabbed an emergency flare, struck it, and tossed it into the supply room filled with fuel-soaked tools and paper logs. The fire spread instantly. Flames raged through the station, illuminating dozens of human shapes, briefly visible silhouettes fleeing the building. Some ran into the mountains. Others dissolved into the dark. The fire exposed how many people had been trapped there, living unseen, walking endless circles around the station. I escaped into the snow. But I wasn't the same. My visibility flickered. Under bright artificial light, I was solid. Under dim or natural light, I faded. Medical teams could barely see me when the rescue helicopter arrived days later. Tests revealed my cellular structure had changed, partially phased. Suspended between dimensions, when the sun returned, my body stabilized. But the change never reversed. Now I can see them. Everywhere. In cities, on roadsides, near outposts. People trapped in the same invisible prison. People the world assumes are dead. They're still here. And every winter, during polar night, more crossover. I help who I can, using my partial invisibility like a bridge, guiding them back toward the visible world. But the truth is terrifying. The darkness doesn't just hide the sun, it hides the living. My name is Tony Reeves, and I've been fixing elevators for years. I started right after high school, working my way up from helper to certified technician here in Anchorage. I've been stuck between floors and broken lifts, crawled through cramped elevator shafts, and rappelled down hundreds of feet to fix cables that snapped under tons of weight. Nothing in those steel boxes ever scared me. But what happened last February in the Wrangler Mountains changed everything I thought I knew about being trapped underground. See, fixing elevators was just my day job. My real passion was exploring abandoned mines for my YouTube channel. I had a few thousand subscribers who loved watching me squeeze through forgotten tunnels and discover old mining equipment. I thought I knew what being underground meant. I was wrong, dead wrong. Every weekend, I'd load my Jeep with climbing gear and head out to some forgotten mine shaft. Alaska's got thousands of them. Gold rush leftovers from the early 1900s. Most are mapped and either sealed or turned into tourist traps, but if you know where to look, you can find the forgotten ones, the ones that don't show up on any modern survey. My gear was professional-grade stuff: a Prezil headlamp with a 10-hour battery, 300 feet of dynamic climbing rope, backup LED lights, protein bars, water, and my camera setup. I always told someone where I was going and when I'd be back. Safety first. That's what 10 years of elevator work teaches you. February 5th was supposed to be a simple explore. I'd found references to an unmapped shaft in some old mining company records at the state library. The Wrangell Mountains, about 6 hours northeast of town. The weather forecast called for light snow. Nothing I couldn't handle. I should have turned back when the light snow became a full-blown blizzard, 3 miles from the site. But I'd already driven 5 hours, and my subscribers were expecting new content. The mine entrance was supposed to be behind a stand of spruce trees marked by an old wooden head frame. Found it right where the records said it would be. The head frame was half-rotted but still standing. The shaft opening was maybe 4 feet across, lined with fitted stones from a century ago. My headlamp beam disappeared into black nothing when I pointed it down. Perfect. I set up my anchor points on 2 solid spruce trees, checked my gear twice, and started filming. What's up, mine explorers? Tony here. And today we're checking out a completely unmapped shaft in the Wranglers. Weather's getting nasty up here, so this will be quick. Let's see what secrets are hiding. The rappel started smooth. My Psel device controlled the descent perfectly, just like it had hundreds of times before. The stone walls were amazingly preserved. You could still see chisel marks where miners had carved their way down over a century ago. At 50 feet, my headlamp picked up something carved into the wall. Initials, JM. Then more names, TK, SR. A dozen different sets of initials, all from the same year. At 100 feet, the walls changed from fitted stone to natural rock. The shaft kept going down into darkness. My rope was rated for 150 feet, so I had maybe 50 feet left when I felt it happen. A sharp crack from above, then another. I looked up and saw the problem. The storm had brought down a tree branch, and it was pressing against my rope where it ran over the edge of the shaft. The rope was starting to fray against the rough stone. Okay, that's not good, I said to my camera. Gonna cut this short and head back up. I reached for my ascenders to start climbing back up. That's when the rope snapped. The fall only lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. I hit the bottom of the shaft hard, my camera and gear scattering across the rocky floor. My headlamp went out. Everything went black. When I came to, my backup LED was blinking weakly beside my head. My left shoulder felt like it was on fire, and I tasted blood in my mouth. But I was alive. I sat up slowly and checked my gear. Camera was cracked, but still recording. Most of my food was scattered across the rocks. My rope was gone, hanging uselessly 40 feet above me. I pointed my light up the shaft. The walls were smooth stone, fitted too perfectly for climbing. No way out the way I came down. But my light also revealed something else. About 20 feet away, there was an opening in the shaft wall, a horizontal tunnel leading into the mountain. Well, I said to my camera, guess we're taking the scenic route out. The tunnel was maybe 5 feet high and 3 feet wide. Old wooden support beams held up the ceiling every few yards. As I crawled through, my light picked up more of those carved initials. Lots more, hundreds of them covering both walls. JM, Day 3. Food running low. TK, Day 7. Rats all gone. SR, Day 9. Eating bark and leather now. My blood went cold. These weren't just names and dates. These were journal entries carved into the wood with knife blades. I kept reading as I crawled. The entries got darker. PH. Day 13. Drew lots today. Tommy lost. JM. Day 15. God forgive us. SR. Day 18. Only 3 left now. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. My light swept across old mining equipment, pickaxes, shovels, oil lanterns from the 1800s. Everything perfectly preserved in the dry underground air. And bones. Lots of bones. They were scattered around the chamber like someone had tossed them there after a meal. I'm no expert, but they looked human. Some had teeth marks. Others were cracked open like someone had been after the marrow inside. I tried to keep my voice steady for the camera. Okay, so it looks like some miners got trapped down here in 1912. Probably a cave-in sealed the entrance. They didn't make it out. That's when I heard the voices. They were faint, echoing from deeper in the tunnel system. 2 people talking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded alive. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone down here?" The voices stopped. Then, after a few seconds, "Over here. Thank God, someone's here." I followed the voices through another tunnel. This one was newer and rougher than the first. My light eventually picked up 2 people huddled around a small chemical light stick. A man and a woman, both in hiking gear. "I'm Brad," the man said, standing up. He was maybe 6 feet tall and thin with a scraggly beard. "This is Ashley." The woman stayed sitting. She looked younger, maybe mid-20s, with short blonde hair and a haunted look in her eyes. "Tony," I said. "What are you guys doing down here?" "Hiking," Brad said. "Got caught in that storm and fell through what we thought was just snow-covered ground. Turned out to be another entrance to this mine system. That was 3 days ago." 3 days. I looked at Ashley. She was thin, way too thin for someone who'd only been trapped a week. And there was something off about Brad. His eyes were too bright. And when he smiled, his teeth looked weird, sharp. "Have you found any way out?" I asked. "We've been exploring," Brad said. "Lots of tunnels, but they all seem to loop back on themselves. We're dead-ended." "Good thing you brought food." He was staring at my scattered protein bars like a starving man. I shared what I had, 3 protein bars and a water bottle. It wasn't much for 3 people, but it was better than nothing. Ashley ate hers so fast she almost choked. Brad ate his slowly, savoring every bite. "How long do you think we'll be stuck?" Ashley asked, her voice hoarse, like she'd been screaming. "I don't know," I said. "I told my buddy I'd be back by Sunday. When I don't show up, he'll call search and rescue." Brad laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Search and rescue?" "Yeah, they'll never find us down here. This place has been eating people for over 100 years. "What do you mean?" I asked. Instead of answering, Brad led me deeper into the chamber. His flashlight, a heavy mag light that looked like it had seen better days, illuminated more bones. But these weren't from the 1800s. Some still had scraps of modern clothing attached. "We found these on day 2, Brad said. "Check the dates on some of those newer carvings." I looked where he pointed. Mixed in with the entries were newer ones. Sarah T. 2012. Fell through snow. No way out. Mike and Jenny, 2013. Cave-in behind us. If anyone finds this. David Chen, 2015. Alone for 3 days. Think I hear something in the tunnels. The most recent one made my stomach drop. Lucas Brady. 2018. Rope broke. God, I can hear them eating in the next chamber. "This mine," Brad said. "It's like a trap. The geology is unstable. Entrances collapse and seal themselves every few years, but new ones open up. It catches people regularly, like it has for decades." Ashley was crying quietly. "Show him the other thing, Brad," she whispered. Brad's smile got wider, showing those sharp teeth again. "Ashley here's been real helpful, haven't you, sweetheart?" he said. That's when I saw her arm. Above the elbow, there were bite marks, fresh ones. Human teeth marks. What the hell? I stepped back. "She's been letting me test her," Brad said conversationally. "You know, to see how she'd taste when we get really hungry, which should be pretty soon now that our food's all gone again." Ashley looked at me with desperate eyes. "He's been down here longer than 20 days, she whispered. "I found more of his carvings." "Brad's been here for months." Brad tilted his head, studying me like I was a piece of meat. "You're bigger than Ashley. Probably tastes better, too. More muscle." I backed toward the tunnel entrance. But Brad moved fast. Faster than someone who'd been starving should be able to move. He blocked my path with that heavy mag light raised like a club. "Where you going, Tony?" "We're all friends here, all trapped together." "You're insane," I said. "No," Brad said. "Just hungry. This mine, it makes you understand what's really important, what you gotta do to survive." The miners and others figured it out. Now it's our turn. He swung the mag light at my head. I ducked and rolled, grabbing my camera bag. Inside was my backup light and something I'd forgotten about, an old multi-tool my grandfather had given me. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "Ashley, run!" I yelled, but she was too weak. Brad caught her before she made it to the tunnel. The sounds she made still wake me up at night. I ran deeper into the mine system, Brad's footsteps echoing behind me. I found myself in a chamber full of old mining equipment, pickaxes, shovels, and something that made my heart race. Sticks of dynamite. Old ones, probably from the original mining operation. The fuses looked dry-rotted, but the explosives might still be good. Brad's voice echoed from somewhere behind me. "Tony, don't make this harder than it has to be." Ashley's already gone quiet. Real peaceful like. "Your turn now." I grabbed 3 sticks of dynamite and what looked like a working fuse. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work, but I managed to rig up a crude trap near the chamber entrance. When Brad appeared, following my light, I lit the fuse. "You crazy bastard," he screamed, diving for cover. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Rock dust filled the air, and half the tunnel ceiling came down between me and Brad. I could hear him on the other side, digging at the rocks and cursing. I found Ashley in the next chamber over. She was still breathing, but barely. The bite wounds on her arms had gotten infected, and she was burning up with fever. "Ashley," I whispered. "Yeah, it's me." "We're getting out of here." She grabbed my wrist with what little strength she had left. He's not human anymore," she whispered. "Been down here too long eating people. It changed him." "How long has he really been here?" "I found his carvings from 2010, 5 years of eating anyone who fell down here." She coughed, and blood came up. Don't let him do that to you." Ashley died about an hour later. I stayed with her until the end, then did what I had to do. I used her body to distract Brad when he finally dug through the rockfall. While he was busy, I explored the far end of the chamber system. That's where I found it. A narrow crack in the ceiling that angled upward. It was barely wide enough for a person, but my light showed it going up for a long way, maybe all the way to the surface. The climb was the worst thing I've ever experienced. The crack was so narrow, I had to take off my clothes to fit through. The rock was sharp and freezing cold. It was like being born again through a birth canal made of broken glass. I lost track of time in that chimney. Could have been 8 hours, could have been 10. My hands and knees were bleeding from the rough rock. The cold was so intense I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. But eventually, I saw something that wasn't my flashlight beam, natural light filtering down from above. I squeezed through the final few feet and emerged onto a snow-covered mountainside. It was still storming and I was naked in 30-degree weather, but I was out. A trucker found me collapsed on the highway 2 miles from where I came out of the mountain. I was blue from hypothermia and barely conscious. I lost 4 toes and 3 fingers to frostbite, but I lived. I told the police everything about Brad, about Ashley, about the bones, and the centuries of people who'd been trapped in that mine. They sent search and rescue teams, but by the time they got there, the entrance I'd used was gone. Another rockfall had sealed it off. The entrance where I'd originally rappelled down, also gone. The storm had brought down half the mountainside, burying the old headframe under tons of rock and snow. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed there was a massive cave system under that mountain, but every attempt to find a way in failed. The geology was too unstable. Any disturbance just caused more rockfalls. The state police investigation turned up 100 missing persons cases over the past 40 years, all in that same area. All people who'd gone hiking or exploring and never came back. The mine had been feeding for decades. I don't do elevator work anymore. Can't handle being in enclosed spaces. These days, I monitor missing person reports for Alaska and the surrounding states. Whenever someone disappears near the Wrangler Mountains, I know the mine has claimed another victim. Sometimes I think about Brad. Still down there in the dark, still hungry, still waiting for the next person to fall through the snow into his underground hunting ground. The mine's still there under all that rock. Still hungry, still waiting. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. My name is Danny Rodriguez, and I've been delivering pizzas around Anchorage for several years now. I know every street in this city like the back of my hand. I've dealt with drunk college kids, angry customers, and even had my car broken into twice. But none of that prepared me for what I'd face when I took a second job as a hunting guide in the Chugach Mountains. I started guiding tourists because pizza delivery wasn't paying enough. My rent kept going up, and I needed extra cash. A friend told me about this outfit that needed guides for weekend hunting trips. They said all I needed was basic outdoor knowledge and a clean driving record. Easy money, right? I grew up camping with my grandfather before he disappeared on a hunting trip years ago. I figured I knew enough about the wilderness to keep some city folks safe for a couple of days. The company gave me a 2-day training course and a laminated sheet of emergency procedures. They handed me a GPS unit, a satellite phone for emergencies, and a basic first aid kit. My supervisor, Jim, was this old guy who'd been guiding for years. He told me the tourists usually just wanted to see some wildlife and take pictures. Most never even fired their rifles. Just keep them safe and happy, Jim said. Follow the marked trails, set up camp at the designated spots, and radio in every evening at 8. Easy as pie. My first group was a family from Texas. Mark, his wife Sarah, and their teenage son Kyle. They wanted to see real Alaska and maybe bag a moose if they got lucky. Mark had spent thousands on fancy hunting gear but had never been north of Oklahoma. Sarah kept taking selfies with every tree we passed. Kyle wouldn't put down his phone, even though we had no signal up there. We drove out to the trailhead early Friday morning in my beat-up Ford pickup. The plan was simple. Hike 10 miles to base camp, set up tents, then spend Saturday looking for game. Sunday, we'd hike back out. I'd done this route twice during training. Nothing to it. But on day 2, everything started going wrong. We were maybe 2 hours into our morning hike when Kyle spotted something weird. "Hey, look at these tracks," he called out, pointing to the muddy ground near a small creek. I walked over, expecting to see deer prints or maybe a bear paw. Instead, I found footprints unlike anything I'd ever seen. They were huge, about 15 inches long and shaped like human feet, but way too big. The prints showed 5 toes, but each toe ended in what looked like razor-sharp claw marks that had torn deep grooves in the mud. "It's probably just a bear that reared up on its hind legs," I told them, though I wasn't really convinced. I'd seen bear tracks before, and these were different. Bears have rounded paws with short claws. These looked almost human, except for the size and those wicked claws. Mark was getting excited, thinking we'd found our trophy animal. "How big would a bear have to be to make prints like that?" he asked, kneeling down to take pictures. I measured the prints with my hand. They were nearly twice as long as my boot. "Pretty big," I admitted. "Maybe 1,000 lb." Sarah didn't like the sound of that. "Are we safe out here? Should we go back?" I reassured her that bears usually avoid people and we had bear spray if needed. But privately, I was starting to feel uneasy. These tracks were fresh, maybe a few hours old at most, and they seemed to be following the same trail we were on. That night at camp, things got worse. I was just drifting off to sleep around midnight when I heard something moving in the woods around us. It sounded like heavy breathing, but deeper and more guttural than any animal I knew. The sound would circle our camp, maybe 20 feet out in the trees, stopping every few minutes like whatever was making it was studying us. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent. "Hello?" I called out, sweeping the beam across the tree line. "Anyone out there?" The breathing stopped immediately, but I could see the trees swaying and rustling even though there was no wind that night. It was like something massive was moving through the forest, pushing branches aside as it went. I kept the light on for another 10 minutes but saw nothing except dark trees and shadows. Eventually, the sounds faded away, and I managed to fall asleep. When I woke up Saturday morning, our food cache was destroyed. We'd hung our supplies in a metal bear container about 10 feet up a tree following proper wilderness protocol. That container was military-grade aluminum designed to withstand a grizzly attack. but whatever had gotten into it had torn the metal apart like it was tissue paper. Long claw marks had shredded the sides of the container. Our canned food was scattered everywhere. Some cans completely crushed by what must have been incredible force. Even our backup water bottles were punctured and drained. Jesus Christ, Mark whispered, staring at the destruction. What the hell did this? I found tufts of black hair caught on nearby branches where the creature had climbed the tree. The hair was coarse like a bear's, but much thicker than anything I'd ever seen. Each strand was almost like wire. I tried to stay calm for the family's sake. It's just a really big bear, I said, though I was starting to doubt that myself. We'll be more careful tonight. But Kyle had been studying the area around the destroyed cache. Dad, look at this, he said, pointing to the ground. There were more of those massive footprints, and they led directly away from our camp toward the trail we planned to hike that day. It was like the creature had deliberately followed us here and was now waiting somewhere ahead. Sarah wanted to call for pickup immediately, but our satellite phone wasn't getting a signal. The GPS was acting up too, showing our location as somewhere completely different from where we actually were. I tried adjusting the antenna and checking the batteries, but nothing worked. We'll hike back to the truck, I decided. It's only 5 miles. But as we packed up camp, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were fresh prints all around our tents, prints we hadn't seen the night before. Whatever had been breathing in the woods had come right up to where we were sleeping, circling us over and over again. The prints showed that it had stood next to each tent for several minutes, just watching us sleep. We started hiking back around noon, moving as fast as we could with full packs. I kept checking behind us, and every time I looked, there were new prints following our trail. The creature was tracking us, staying maybe a quarter mile back, but keeping pace perfectly. Mark was trying to stay brave for his family, but I could see he was scared. How fast can bears run? He asked me quietly. Faster than us, I admitted. But they usually don't pursue people this way. This isn't normal bear behavior. Kyle was the first to spot it. We'd stopped for a water break when he grabbed my arm and pointed into the trees. There, he whispered. Do you see it? About 100 yards away, standing perfectly still between 2 large spruces, was a massive shadow. It looked like a person, but way too tall and wide. I estimated it was at least 12 feet high, with arms that hung down past its knees. I raised my binoculars and tried to get a better look, but the thing moved deeper into the forest before I could focus on it. All I caught was a glimpse of something dark and hairy disappearing behind the trees. It's following us, Sarah said, her voice shaking. It's been following us this whole time. I tried to radio for help on every frequency but got nothing but static. Our GPS was completely dead now, showing error messages I'd never seen before. Even my compass was spinning wildly like something was interfering with the magnetic field. We picked up the pace, practically jogging down the trail. But every few minutes, one of us would spot movement in the trees. Always at the edge of our vision, always too far away to see clearly. Then around 4 in the afternoon, it happened. We were crossing a small clearing when I heard wood snapping behind us. I turned around and saw trees literally being pushed aside as something huge forced its way through the forest. Whatever was making that noise had to weigh at least 1,000 lb, maybe more. Run, I told them. Run now. We sprinted across the clearing and back into the tree line on the other side. Behind us, the crashing sounds got louder and closer. I could hear heavy footsteps now, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. We reached a rocky outcrop where we could take cover and catch our breath. Mark had his rifle out, hands shaking as he tried to load it. What do you see back there? He asked. I peered around the rocks toward the clearing we'd just crossed. At first, I saw nothing. Then something moved near the tree line. It stepped out into the open, and I got my first clear look at the thing that had been hunting us. It was definitely not a bear. The creature stood upright like a human, but was massive, probably 12 feet tall and built like a gorilla, but even broader across the shoulders. Its arms were incredibly long, reaching almost to its knees, and ended in hands with fingers like thick tree branches. The whole body was covered in dark, shaggy hair that looked almost black in the afternoon light. But the face was the worst part. It looked like someone had tried to mix a human and an ape, creating something that shouldn't exist. The eyes were too intelligent, too focused. It wasn't just an animal. It was studying us, planning something. When it saw me watching, the creature opened its mouth and let out a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't quite a roar or a howl, but something in between. A deep, ear-splitting call that echoed off the mountains around us. And from different directions in the forest, other voices answered. There were more of them out there, maybe 4 or 5, all calling back and forth like they were coordinating something. We were surrounded. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "Oh God. Oh God. Oh God." I fired 3 shots in the air, hoping to scare them off. The sound stopped immediately, but I could feel them out there, watching us from the trees. We spent the worst night of my life huddled together behind those rocks. The creatures never attacked directly, but they kept us awake all night. They would throw rocks, huge boulders that no normal animal could lift, hitting the ground around us with perfect accuracy. Every hour or so, one of them would let out that horrible howl, and the others would answer from different positions. They were playing with us. When dawn finally came, we found our campsite from the night before completely destroyed. Everything we'd left behind was torn apart or bent into twisted shapes. Even our metal tent stakes were snapped in half. But that wasn't the worst discovery. While we waited for a rescue helicopter I'd finally managed to call on the satellite phone, I decided to explore a cave system we'd spotted nearby. I thought maybe I could find some clue about what these creatures were. What I found inside that cave changed everything. The walls were covered with scratch marks. Deep gouges carved into solid rock by something with incredible strength. But in the deepest part of the cave, I found something that made me understand we'd been in much more danger than I'd realized. Human skulls. Dozens of them arranged in careful patterns like some kind of shrine. Some of the skulls showed crushing damage from massive jaws. Others had claw marks scraped across the bone. A few still had bits of fabric or metal attached. Pieces of clothing and equipment from people who disappeared in these mountains over the years. And then I found something that made my heart stop. Among the collection was a set of military dog tags, green with age, but still readable. The name stamped on them was Rodriguez Miguel, my grandfather's name. My grandfather had disappeared on a hunting trip in these exact mountains 20 years ago. Search teams never found a trace of him. Now I knew why. These creatures had been collecting trophies from hunters and hikers for decades, maybe longer. They specifically targeted experienced outdoorsmen, people who thought they knew how to survive in the wilderness. The helicopter arrived just as I was making my way back to the others. But as the pilot was preparing to land, the creatures decided to make their final play. 6 of them emerged from the forest at once, moving with coordinated precision. Each one was massive, at least 12 feet tall, with the same elongated arms and intelligent predatory faces I'd seen before. They started hurling boulders at the helicopter with incredible accuracy. The pilot had to bank hard to avoid a rock the size of a washing machine that would have taken out his rotor blades. One of the creatures actually leaped toward the aircraft as it hovered, jumping at least 10 feet into the air, trying to grab the landing skid. The pilot pulled up just in time, and we'd barely escaped. When I reported what happened to the park authorities, they dismissed my story as a bear encounter gone wrong. Traumatic experiences can make people see things that aren't there, the ranger told me with a patronizing smile. But within a month, 3 more hunting parties reported similar encounters in the Chugach Mountains. Each story was the same. Massive humanoid creatures, coordinated hunting behavior, and evidence of intelligence far beyond any known animal. When I told my grandmother about finding my grandfather's dog tags, she put me in touch with some native Alaskan elders. They listened to my story without surprise. "You met the Kushtika's brothers," one old man told me. "Ancient ones who collect the souls of hunters in the mountains. Your grandfather was taken by them, and now you've seen why." I quit the guiding job immediately. I'm back to delivering pizzas full-time now, and I plan to stay that way. The mountains can keep their secrets, but sometimes late at night when I'm driving the empty streets of Anchorage, I'll catch a glimpse of something moving in the shadows between buildings. Something too tall, too broad, watching me from the darkness. I think they remember me, and I think they're waiting for me to come back to their territory. I won't be returning to the Chugach Mountains anytime soon. Some hunting trips aren't worth the risk, no matter how much they pay. My name is Mike Torres, and I've been hunting elk in Alaska for years. I work at Peterson's Auto Parts here in Anchorage, but every October, I take my vacation time to head up to the Talatina Mountains for hunting season. I've got my hunting license, completed my safety courses, and I know these mountains better than most people know their own neighborhoods. I've tracked elk through thick forests, camped alone for weeks, and never had any problems. But what happened last October near Troublesome Creek changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in those mountains. Some things up there aren't what they appear to be. October 15th was opening day of elk season. I'd been planning this trip for months, studying maps, checking weather reports, and making sure all my gear was ready. The forecast looked perfect. Clear skies, temperatures in the 30s at night, 50s during the day. I loaded up my Ford F-250 with everything I needed, my rifle, camping gear, enough food for 7 days, and my GPS unit. I'd hunted this area before, about 20 miles north of Talatina, where Troublesome Creek runs through a valley known for big elk herds. The drive took 4 hours on progressively smaller roads until I was on a dirt logging road that barely fit my truck. I found my usual spot around 3 p.m., a small clearing next to the creek, sheltered by thick spruce trees, perfect for a base camp. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and prepared for an early morning hunt. The area felt exactly like it always had, quiet, peaceful, with fresh elk sign everywhere. I could see tracks in the mud near the creek, big prints that told me there were mature bulls in the area. That first evening, I sat by my campfire, cleaning my rifle and going over my hunting plan. I'd wake up before dawn, follow the creek upstream for about a mile, then cut east into the thick timber where I'd seen elk before. The weather was holding perfect, no wind to carry my scent, and the moon would give me enough light to move through the forest safely. I went to bed feeling confident about my chances. I woke up at 4 a.m. to the sound of my alarm. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. I figured that was normal for hunting season when there's more human activity in the woods. I made coffee on my camp stove, ate a quick breakfast, and headed out with my rifle and day pack. The temperature was right around freezing, and my breath made clouds in the beam of my headlamp. About a half mile from camp, I found them. 3 elk tracks in a muddy patch near the creek. These weren't from yesterday. The edges were sharp and clean, probably made just a few hours earlier. They were heading upstream, deeper into the mountains. Perfect. I turned off my headlamp as the sky started getting lighter and began following the trail. For the next 3 hours, I tracked those prints through increasingly thick forest. The elk had been moving steadily, not running, just walking at a normal pace. Every few hundred yards, I'd find fresh, sign-broken branches, disturbed leaves, more tracks, and soft ground. Whoever made these tracks was big, probably a mature bull based on the size of the hoof prints. Then around 7 a.m., the tracks just stopped. I was standing in a small clearing, maybe 10 feet across, looking down at the last clear hoofprint in the mud. Beyond that, nothing. I circled the entire clearing twice, looking for where the elk might have gone. There were no more tracks leading out of the clearing in any direction. It was like the animal had just vanished into thin air. That's when I noticed something else. Right where the elk tracks ended, there was a different set of prints in the mud, human footprints. Barefoot human footprints. I knelt down to get a better look. They were definitely human. I could see the outline of toes, the arch of the foot, even what looked like the impression of toenails. But who the hell would be walking around barefoot in freezing October weather? The prints were fresh, just like the elk tracks had been, and they were heading back toward my camp. A cold feeling started growing in my stomach. I stood up and looked around the clearing again. Something was very wrong here. Elk don't just disappear, and people don't walk around barefoot in near-freezing weather. I checked my GPS. I was about 3 miles from camp, deeper in the mountains than I'd ever been before. I decided to follow the barefoot tracks back toward camp. Maybe I'd run into whoever was out here and get some answers. The tracks were easy to follow. The person had stepped in every muddy spot like they were deliberately leaving a trail. But as I followed them, I noticed they weren't taking the most direct route back to camp. They were wandering, circling around trees, sometimes doubling back on themselves. It took me 3 hours to follow the tracks back to my campsite, and what I found there made my blood run cold. The bare footprints circled my entire camp, not once, but multiple times. There were prints by my tent, around my fire pit, near my truck. Someone had been walking around my campsite for what must have been hours while I was sleeping. I checked my truck first. Nothing missing, no damage. My gear was exactly where I'd left it. But the idea that someone had been walking around my camp all night while I was defenseless in my tent made me feel sick. I grabbed my rifle and did a complete check of the area, but there was no sign of whoever had been there. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was another hunter who'd gotten lost and stumbled onto my camp during the night. Maybe they were disoriented, and that's why they were barefoot. But even as I thought it, I knew it didn't make sense. No lost hunter would circle a campsite multiple times and then just leave. I spent the rest of that day closer to camp, trying to hunt the area within a mile radius, but I couldn't concentrate. Every sound made me look over my shoulder. Every shadow looked like it might be moving. I kept thinking about those barefoot tracks and how they'd appeared exactly where the elk tracks had disappeared. That evening, I built my fire bigger than usual and kept my rifle within reach. I tried to eat dinner, but I wasn't hungry. The forest around me felt different now, like I was being watched. Every time a branch creaked in the wind, I'd look up, expecting to see someone standing at the edge of the firelight. Around 9 p.m., I was getting ready to turn in when I saw movement at the tree line. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the forest. There, standing maybe 30 yards away, was a man. He was completely naked, standing perfectly still between two spruce trees. Even at that distance, I could tell something was off about him. His proportions looked wrong somehow. His arms seemed too long for his body, and his torso was too wide. But what really got to me was how still he was. No one stands that motionless in freezing weather. "Hey!" I called out. "You woke out there?" The man turned and ran into the forest, but it wasn't a normal run. It was too fast, too fluid, like he was moving on all fours, even though I could swear he was upright. I grabbed my rifle and my flashlight and followed him into the trees. I could hear him crashing through the underbrush ahead of me, but I couldn't see him. After about 30 yards, the sound stopped. I swept my flashlight back and forth, but there was nothing. Then I looked down at the ground, fresh elk tracks, big ones, heading deeper into the forest. I followed the tracks for maybe 20 yards before the reality of what I was seeing hit me. These tracks were identical to the ones I'd followed that morning. Exactly the same size, exactly the same stride length, but that was impossible. The naked man I'd seen couldn't have been an elk, could he? I stood there in the dark forest, my flashlight beam shaking as my hands trembled. Nothing about this made sense. People don't turn into elk, but I couldn't deny what I'd seen. The naked man running into the forest and elk tracks where his footprints should have been. I went back to camp and sat by my fire, trying to think rationally about what was happening. Maybe I was seeing things. Maybe the stress of hunting alone was getting to me. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen was real. The next morning, I woke up to find my firewood neatly stacked next to my fire pit. Not scattered like I'd left it, but carefully arranged in a perfect pile, and the fire itself was still burning, even though it should have died out hours ago. I looked around the campsite and found tracks everywhere. Most were elk tracks, but some showed the animal walking on just its hind legs like a person. The tracks went right up to my fire pit, where there were impressions in the dirt that looked like something had been sitting. That's when I remembered something my grandfather had told me years ago. He was part Yupik, and he used to tell stories about things called Kushtaka shapeshifters that could take any animal form. He said they lived in the deep wilderness and sometimes helped lost hunters, but they always wanted something in return. I spent that day researching on my phone using what little cell signal I could get. The stories I found online were all similar ancient Alaskan legends about entities that could transform into any animal they consumed. They were supposed to be protectors of the wilderness, but they were also dangerous. Some stories said they would help hunters, but only if the hunter agreed to let them take their form. As I read, I started noticing other things around my camp. Bear tracks that came within 20 yards of my tent and then suddenly turned away, like something had scared off the bear. Scratch marks on trees that were too high and too deep to be from any normal animal. And everywhere, those elk tracks that sometimes showed the animal walking upright. That evening, I decided to try something. I'd read that tobacco was considered a sacred offering in many native traditions. I didn't smoke, but I had some chewing tobacco in my truck. I left a small pile of it next to my fire pit before going to bed. I woke up the next morning to find the tobacco gone and a fresh elk quarter hanging from a tree branch near my camp. The meat was clean, professionally butchered, and still warm. There was no way a normal elk had been killed and processed that quickly. I knew I should pack up and leave right then, but I was fascinated. Whatever was out there had been protecting me and was now providing food. I cooked some of the elk meat for breakfast, and it was the best I'd ever tasted. Over the next 2 days, I started seeing the creature more often. It would appear as different animals. Sometimes an elk, sometimes a wolf, sometimes that naked human form. But the eyes were always the same, intelligent and aware in a way that no animal's eyes should be. On my last night, I was sitting by my fire when an elk walked into my campsite. But this elk was walking on its hind legs like a person. It sat down across from my fire and held out its front hooves toward the flames, warming them like hands. The elk looked directly at me and nodded like it was acknowledging our partnership. Then it spoke, not with words, but directly into my mind. "You understand now? We help each other. But I need your form to help others like you." That's when I realized what it wanted. The creature could take any animal form, but to take human form, it needed to consume a human first. It had been studying me, learning how to copy my appearance, and now it wanted me to agree to let it take my life so it could help other hunters by appearing as me. I looked into those intelligent elk eyes and saw versions of myself reflected there. The creature had been practicing, creating imperfect copies of my face and body. It was getting better each time. "No," I said out loud. "I won't let you take my form." The elk's expression changed. The intelligence in its eyes turned cold, predatory. It stood up on its hind legs and walked back into the forest. But I could feel its anger, its disappointment that I'd broken our partnership. I packed up my camp that night and tried to start my truck. Nothing. The engine wouldn't even turn over. I popped the hood and found that several wires had been chewed through, but not by any animal I knew. The cuts were too precise, too purposeful. I grabbed my pack and started hiking toward the main road. It was 30 miles through rough country, but I didn't have a choice. As I walked, I could hear animals moving parallel to my path. Sometimes I'd see them. A elk watching me from a ridge, a wolf keeping pace through the trees, and always that naked human form appearing and disappearing at the edge of my vision. It took me 5 days to reach the ranger station at the park entrance. I was dehydrated, exhausted, and probably hypothermic. The rangers took me to the hospital and then organized a search party to find my truck and investigate my story. They found my campsite exactly as I described, but there was no evidence of any unusual animal activity. No strange tracks, no signs of elk walking upright, nothing. The rangers figured I'd gotten spooked by normal wildlife and let my imagination run wild. But 6 months later, I started hearing stories from other hunters in the area. They talked about meeting a helpful guy named Mike Torres, who would appear when they were lost or in trouble. This Mike would help them find their way back to safety and then disappear into the forest. The thing is, I haven't been back to Talatina since that October, and I never told anyone my last name when I met other hunters up there. But somehow, that creature learned it. It's still up there, wearing my face, using my name, and I have no idea what it really wants from the people it helps. I still work at the auto parts store. I still love hunting, but I'll never go back to the Talatina Mountains because somewhere up there, something is walking around looking exactly like me, and I don't think its intentions are as helpful as it pretends them to be.